Hey warriors, it's Gwen here, and this is Empowerment in Illness. You're listening to our series, The System Isn't Broken. It was built this way. This series is all about pulling back the curtains, looking at the deeper issues that shape not just our health, but the way we're treated, the way we're heard, and sometimes the way we're dismissed. Now, I want to tell you something I witnessed. I was scrolling on TikTok the other day and landed on someone's live broadcast. I could hear a heated exchange between a patient and a nurse. The nurse was raising her voice, scolding the patient in front of everybody watching the live. I asked in the comments if the patient could request to speak with the head nurse or an advocate. Someone replied that the patient was already speaking to the head nurse. The head nurse told the patient, "You were marked as difficult because you kicked a nurse during your last stay." She added, "That nurse has the right to press charges." The patient tried to explain. "I was in pain. I was scared. No one was helping me." But her words didn't seem to matter. There were no advocate, no mediator. No one stepped in. And in that moment, I saw everything that's broken. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a clinic or hospital and just felt the room change the second you spoke up? Maybe you asked a few too many questions. Maybe you questioned the treatment plan. Maybe you cried because the pain and frustration became too much. And suddenly, you weren't just a patient anymore. You were a problem. This episode is a big one. Maybe one of the most important we've ever done. We're talking about something that hides in plain sight. The silent tension. The unspoken war between patients and medical staff. We're going to get into what happens when labels like difficult get thrown around. When providers feel threatened. When listening stops. And let me be clear. We're not here to point fingers. We're here to hold space for truth, for accountability, and for compassion on both sides. Because if we want healthcare to actually change, we've got to start talking about what hurts. Let's talk. Warrior to warrior. Let's start with the word difficult. It sounds so simple, right? But for so many of us, once that word shows up in our charts or get whispered behind a nurse's station, it sticks. And it follows us from room to room, appointment to appointment, year after year. And what's worse, you don't always know it's there. You just start to feel the shift. The way providers talk to you changes. Their tone is shorter. Their patient runs out faster. You sense the judgment before you even sit down. Sometimes you're labeled difficult just for asking for answers. For saying, "Hey, this doesn't feel right." For advocating for yourself when no one else will. And that's when the trust starts to break down. You are not seen as a partner in your own care anymore. You're seen as a challenge, a disruption, a burden. And here's what makes it even harder. When you've been dismissed or gaslit before, it hurts more each time it happens. So you might raise your voice or cry or shut down completely. And boom, that behavior gets interpreted as non-compliant or emotional or dramatic. It becomes a cycle. One where being in pain or being scared somehow turns into a reason not to be taken seriously. This episode isn't about blaming the people who work in these systems. It's about naming the truth. Because how can we heal what we're afraid to say out loud? That label, difficult, doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a system that hasn't been built to listen. And until we change that, we'll keep repeating the same harmful story. Now, let's look at the other side of this, the people providing care. Because here's the truth. Some of them are carrying so much that it's breaking them down too. Nurses, doctors, medical assistants, Many of them are working double shifts, managing impossible caseloads, and showing up in systems that never gave them the tools to process their own trauma. And when burnout shows up, it doesn't just look like exhaustion. It looks like detachment, frustration, and sometimes even cruelty. Imagine being in a room with a patient who's scared and angry, but you're already running 90 minutes behind, haven't eaten, and just came from a cold blue. It's not hard to see how empathy starts to thin out. And in those moments, the system rewards speed, not connection. It praises efficiency, not listening. It pressures providers to treat symptoms, not people. That doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does explain how it happens. Medical staff aren't robots. They're people too. People who were taught that showing too much emotion is unprofessional, or that crying in the break room is weak. So what do? They shove it down, put up walls, and sometimes patients pay the price. This is where the war begins. One side walks in with lived pain, desperate to be heard. The other walks in overwhelmed, unregulated, and emotionally bankrupt. Both sides wounded, both sides unheard. And no one wins in that kind of environment. No one. Let's talk about trauma, because it's everywhere in this conversation, even when we don't call it that. Patients often carry trauma from years of being misdiagnosed, ignored, or mistreated. Some have PTSD from past medical procedures. Others have been shamed for their weight, their gender, their skin color, their history, or their diagnosis. And all of that lives in the body. So when someone walks into a doctor's office, their nervous system might already be in fight or flight. They're bracing for another battle before a single word is even said. Now, think about providers. Many of them are dealing with their own unhealed trauma. They've watched patients die. They've made mistakes they carry in silence. They've been yelled at, threatened, even assaulted. Sometimes by the very people they're trying to help. But here's the catch. They're rarely given the space to process any of it. There's no real system of emotional support for them either. And that's where things get messy. Because we put two people in a room, one who's been traumatized by the healthcare system and one who's been traumatized within it. You've got a recipe for disconnection. Neither one feels safe. And when people don't feel safe, they armor up. They don't listen. They try to protect themselves the only way they know how, by shutting down or lashing out. So what do we do with that? How do we move forward when both sides are hurting? We start by recognizing that trauma responses aren't personal, they're survival. And if you want something different, we have to lead with curiosity instead of judgment. What if instead of asking, "Why are you being difficult?" we ask, "What happened to you?" That one shift could change everything. So where do we go from here? What does it actually look like to change this dynamic, not just in theory, but in practice? It starts with something I call a compassion reset. That's when both the patient and the provider pause and remember, we are human beings first. Before the symptoms, before the chart, before the title, just two people, both navigating pain, pressure, and fear in very different ways. A compassion reset is a conscious choice to come back to the table with empathy. It's not about excusing harm. It's about creating space where healing conversations can actually happen. Imagine if clinics and hospitals had actual training for this, not just how to handle difficult patients, but how to recognize when someone is in distress. What if staff learn how to de-escalate with care, not control? And on the other side, what if patients were given tools to communicate their needs more clearly, or spaces to decompress after traumatic appointments. These aren't luxuries. They're necessities in a broken system. Accountability matters too, because some behaviors on either side is harmful. It crosses the line. But accountability without compassion just becomes punishment. And that doesn't solve anything. We need systems that ask not just what went wrong, but how can we prevent this from happening again? That's a much more powerful question. Healing the divide won't happen overnight. It's going to take training, policies, support systems, and hard conversations. But if we can start by saying, you are not the enemy, we've already taken the first step. And I believe that step is possible because I've seen it, I've lived it, and I know you have too. The scene I witnessed, a head nurse yelling at a patient, threatening her with legal actions while no one stepped in to mediate, was a microcosm of everything wrong with modern healthcare. There was no advocate, no social worker, no mediator, just conflict. And in that silence, harm took root. Hospitals need to do better. Every facility should have patient advocates who are trained to de-escalate, mediate, and protect the rights of both patient and staff. Social workers should be present during conflicts to offer neutral support. And more importantly, medical team must be trained in communication, empathy, and boundary setting. Patients, too, must know their rights. They have the right to request an advocate, to ask for a new provider, and to be treated with respect. There should be clear protocol in place for addressing conflict, not reactive threats or public confrontations. Dignity must be preserved, especially in moments of crisis. Imagine how different the outcome might have been if someone had calmly entered the room and asked, how can we help everyone feel safe right now? That's not weakness, that's leadership. And that's how we began to rewrite the script. Let's talk about what it means to reclaim your voice, especially in a room that's already decided not to hear you. Because when you've been labeled, when you've been dismissed, when you've been talked over or looked past, it chips away at something inside you. It's not just frustrating, it's dehumanizing. You start to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Should I just stay quiet? Maybe if I say it differently, they'll take me seriously. That's what internalized medical gaslighting looks like. And it's real. But here's the truth, and I want you to hold on to this. Your voice matters. Your lived experience matters. You are not too much. You are not imagining it. And you are not the problem because you refuse to suffer in silence. Now, using your voice doesn't always mean raising the volume. Sometimes it means bringing a support person to your appointment. Sometimes it means asking for everything in writing. Sometimes it means switching providers, filing a grievance, or simply saying, I don't feel safe in this interaction. Every one of those actions is a form of resistance. Every one is a way of saying, I deserve better. And yes, I know it takes energy to keep advocating. Energy that many of us with chronic illness simply don't have to spare. But reclaiming your voice doesn't have to mean doing it all alone. That's why this community exists. That's why we're having this conversation. Because the more we speak up, the harder it becomes for the system to ignore us. And that, my friend, is how change begins. Check this out. This whole conversation, we're having it because I've lived it too. I've experienced what it's like to be labeled before I even had a chance to speak, and I'll never forget it. It happened after I had knee surgery. I was already in pain. I was feeling lousy and just trying to heal. A nurse came into the room, and from that moment she walked in, I felt it. That shift, that cold energy. No smile, no greeting, just judgment. She didn't even introduce herself before making up her mind about me. And before I knew it, I was labeled combative. Not because I was yelling, not because I refused care, but because I asked questions, because I expected respect. I looked at her and said, "You don't know me, and it's really unfortunate that you judge me before even getting to know who I am." I stayed calm, but I stood my ground. I asked to speak to the head nurse, and thankfully they listened. That nurse was removed from my care. And you know what? She later came back and apologized. That meant something, but so did the fact that it had to happen at all. I've always treated medical staff with respect. I know they work hard. I know they're under pressure. But I also deserve the same basic human decency. We all do. And the truth is, almost everyone I know with a chronic illness has a story like mine. That's not okay. And it's why I keep showing up to have these conversations. Because respect shouldn't be earned through silence. It should be the starting point, every single time. All right, warriors, let's take what we've talked about today and turn it into action. Because awareness is powerful, but change comes when we move with intention. Here are a few things we can start doing right now to protect your peace, speak your truth, and reclaim your space in the healthcare system. Number 1, document everything. Keep a personal journal of every appointment, interaction, and red flag. Who did you speak to? What was said? How did you feel? If something goes wrong, having that record can protect you and validate your experience when your words are questioned. Number 2, don't go alone if you don't have to. Bring someone with you to your appointments whenever you can. A partner, friend, advocate, someone who can witness, take notes, or simply hold space for you. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a strategy. Number 3, set the tone early. At the start of a visit, try saying something like, "I'm someone who has a hard time feeling heard in the past, and I really appreciate clear communication and patience today." It's honest, and it helps shift the energy from the jump. Number 4, use your patient rights. You have the right to request a different provider. You have the right to file a complaint. You have the right to ask for accommodations. And you have the right to be treated with respect. Period. Number 5, stand in your worth. You are not too emotional. You are not too complicated. You are not difficult for needing answers or for having boundaries. You are worthy of care that honors your full humanity, not just your diagnosis. Before we leave, I would like to close with a special portion of the show I call Healing Heartbeats. This is where we allow ourselves to wallow in sorrow. Give yourself 3 minutes to laugh, cry, scream, cuss, or just sit in silence. Whatever you need to do to feel it, do it. Let the depression in for only 3 minutes. Once you've reached 3 minutes, compartmentalize it and get back to living. This is a rinse and repeat behavior. You cannot let depression take over, because when it does, it will not let go. When we hear about the passing of someone, they have the day they were born and the day they pass away. There is a dash in the middle. It's not a long line, but a short dash. That dash represents your life. Go live in spite of having a chronic illness. Don't let your condition stop you. In every hospital and clinic, there is a quiet war being waged, not just between staff and patients, but within the hearts of everyone who walked through those doors. The patient wants to be heard. The provider wants to be respected. But somewhere along the way, our shared humanity gets buried beneath protocol, pain, and mistrust. We can do better. We must do better. Healthcare was never meant to be a battlefield. It was meant to be a sanctuary. And the first steps toward healing is honesty. We must be brave enough to look at the harm being done and tender enough to imagine something different. We live in a world where people with chronic illness and autoimmune disease are often asked to shrink themselves to fit into a system that was never designed for us. And the moment we speak up, when we advocate, when we cry, when we say, this isn't okay, we risk being labeled. But labels don't define us. We do. We carry so much pain, fear, frustration, hope, and sometimes we carry all of it in one appointment. But still, we show up. Still, we fight for better care. Still, we demand to be seen and heard. That is not being difficult. That is being brave. You are evidence of resilience. Your story matters. Your tears matter. And your courage to speak up, even when it costs you comfort, is how we begin to change the world. So take this moment to remember who you are: a warrior, a truth teller, a person worthy of dignity, respect, and compassion. You don't have to prove your pain to anyone. And you don't have to apologize for needing care that sees you fully. Remember, you have the strength, the heart, and the support to continue your journey. Be safe.